Alright, today I'm going to show you how to change a wheel bearing on a 2008 Mustang GT. A wheel bearings can vary quite a lot from vehicle to vehicle. Usually your lighter cars though are just as simple as this, as long as they're not front wheel drive. This is rear wheel drive, so there's no drive shaft, as you can see, going to the wheel bearing. It's just shock right there. You got your rotors that you take off. You take off your caliper. But you take off the bracket, so you just take off the 2 bolts on the back. The bracket takes off your caliper and your bracket. That way you don't go down and do 2 extra bolts for your caliper. Then sometimes you have little clips, like I don't know if you can see one right here. It slides on your stud. You don't need them on there. They just kind of help hold your rotor in place while you're putting your caliper on. But when I take them off, I don't put them back on. I just let my caliper hold my rotor in place. You got the seal here. And you gotta be very careful taking those off unless you're replacing them. Usually I use a screwdriver and just pry it off. Now you gotta tap on it, but you place your screwdriver right there and don't let it go in very deep, because right after you pry it away from the wheel bearing here, there's a piece of metal that goes around the inside that slips inside, and you don't want to put a hole in that. So you just tap, kind of go around. I put mine against a stud and put it in a stud like that and tap. Then do the same on the other side and prise off. But I want to go ahead and take that off real quick. Now you can see I have it pried away from there now, and it just pulls off. Now you want to be very careful. A piece of metal I'm talking about is that right there. See a scratch right there where the screwdriver hit it? Now I put a little hole in mine. I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to replace it. But if you put a hole in it and it's nothing too big, and you can see that's not really that big, it's more of a dent, but there is a small hole there. You could probably reuse that if you wanted to. It wouldn't hurt that bad, you know, but it's better not to put any holes in them at all if you can. Now this is your center, actually your only bolt for your wheel bearing, and you're going to need a bigger socket. See, for this one, it takes a 36mm, which you want to use on a breaker bar. You can. It fits right on there. And they usually aren't too tight, but I would use a breaker bar because, you know, sometimes people over tighten them. And I wouldn't use an impact wrench to try to break it loose. You might mess up the nut. Or putting it back on. I'd put it back on. I wouldn't tighten it all the way with an impact wrench. Alright, now that I loosened this center nut here, so you can't take it off your fingers. You have to take it off especially with an impact wrench or a ratchet. Now after you loosen that, you want to take out the 2 bolts on the back of this, which is a bracket. There's one right here, and here's the other one down here. Now you don't want to take out the bolts right here that holds your caliper to your bracket. If you take off the bracket, you only got to take out 2 bolts. Then do a crowbar or screwdriver down here, pry it away. And what I usually do is I usually stick one right here, pry against the rotor. That way you loosen it up a little bit, and then it's easier to just pry off. And then you take that out, and I'll show you what we do next. Alright, I took the back bolts on the caliper bracket out, and as you can see, I've been prying it away a little bit. Usually not too bad to get off. And your rotor will come off. I took that clip off. You can go ahead and take your rotor off if you want, and since your caliper is unbolted, but definitely want to go and take this off. I'll finish prying it off, and then finish loosening this nut, and we'll get the wheel bearing off. And I took the rotor off, took the caliper off. I just let it hang there. Your brake lines are really strong. That clip I took off, you can see here, I broke it in 2 pieces. It's not important. I'm not going to put another one on there. I'm not going to reuse it. This is a bolt that I took off here. You can see it was on there. And right after you take that off, this is your wheel bearing. Wheel bearing, see that was really bad, a little wobbly. And then they'll pull off. They're usually stuck a little bit, but they're not pressed in or anything. They just slide right off. So take this one off. Make sure that shaft is, you know, not damaged or anything, which I already checked this one. It's not. And here's your new wheel bearing. and it just slides right on there. Make sure it's straight. Oh, you don't, like, I wouldn't force it if it don't want to go. Just, you gotta take it back off, make sure it's lined up and everything. And actually, I'll show you on this one. Well, I gotta let that cool down, but this one, when I took this old one off, the back of it stayed on there. And it's because it was too wore out. When it heats up and it's wore out, it'll sometimes come into two pieces. But that piece there was stuck on there. So I just heated it real quick and tapped it, and it came off. Wasn't too bad. This right here is probably still a little warm, which is why I didn't want to slide on real good. But I want to take and even it out and try and tap it on, make sure it goes smooth. You don't want to tap it if it's like any rough spots on the shaft, but since this one's just warm, it'll be okay. But after you tap it on, you just put that bolt back on there, tighten it up, and your wheel bearing's on. And you just put the rotor back on, two bolts back on there with your caliper, and tire back on, you're good to go. I put this one back on, went ahead and tightened it up. It's just been free, shouldn't be loose, we'll wiggle it back and forth like this. There should not be any play at all on it, should be tight. It's gonna be a little tight to spin, like, I mean, you can spin it easy with your hand, but you should feel like it's tight in there. And after that, you want to take this cap here. You want to make sure you put it back on, make sure it's even when you put it in. And if you have a socket big enough, you can just put a socket over it and just tap it on. But I just take a hammer or something and lightly tap. If you tap right here, don't tap very hard, it's just gonna be light taps. Shouldn't move, should be good. Now you just put your rotor back on. And your caliper, which you see your brake pads should stay in place. It should stay the same width apart. And should fit on there. And then it's gonna be tight, shoving it back on a little bit. Shouldn't be too bad. So make sure that lines up, which is about lined up right there. And take your bolts here, put them back in. Find a hole. And when you tighten it, it'll probably stay out of the way, and then when you tighten it, it'll pull it all in. I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Alright, I put the caliper bracket back on, tighten it back up. Now all you gotta do is put your tire back on and take it for a test drive. Make sure everything turns good, there ain't no play. And whenever you replace one, I'd highly recommend replacing the other one, because that way your car won't pull to one side. And if your rotors, if they aren't balanced, it still shakes a little bit, it probably means you need to get your rotors turned. Well, I was putting new rotors on mine after I do this, but you want to make sure everything's balanced right, otherwise they'll wear out quicker. But that's pretty much it. And if you have any comments or anything, feel free to comment. I'd like to hear them. Thanks for watching.